Young Renegades, by witty_name. Track 1, Last Young Renegade. Forever is a fickle b.I.h. Words disappear like smoke in the hazy summer air. Promises are sweet whispers slipping from bruised lips, wet and glistening and intoxicating, only to turn sour when the harsh light of dawn peers between cracked blinds. Promises are as fragile as hopes and dreams, crackling like porcelain on the chipped concrete. They hold a place in his heart, buried in an area of limbo, juxtaposed between regret and what if. Keith Coggany. It's been years since Lance has allowed himself to think about that name. About him. That's not to say he hasn't always been there. Hidden in the shadows. Behind his eyelids. Existing in a part of him that he refuses to look at, but feels lingering in his thoughts and doubts nonetheless. A part of him that's given strength whenever he catches a glimpse of the stars above the city haze. Whenever he smells that familiar mix of smoke, leather, oil, and blood. Whenever he feels hands on his skin, soft yet calloused, the strength lurking in the touch. Keith Coggany. Violet eyes. Bite to his words. A fire in his gaze and his touch. Lips mocking, curled into a dare, plump and swollen and split. Keith Coggany. They were once a burning flame, uncontrollable and wild. One touch to ignite a blaze that lasted throughout the night. One night was all it took to douse the flames. Reduce them to mere smoke in the summer rain. Keith Coggany. An ember inside him that refuses to die. No matter how smoldered the fire. No matter the ruins of ash left behind. An ember that lives on. Distant and cold, but alive. An ember that flares occasionally, fueled by his weakness to memories. Weakness to the smell of smoke and leather. Memories brought up by a rough touch and or a tongue that tastes of blood. Memories that are always edged with regret and sharp with ache. Memories that are tainted, bringing in their wake a bitter anger that refuses to dissipate, lest it give way to a deeper ache that refuses to feel. He should have known. In a way, he did know. He knew, and he didn't care. He decided what they felt, what they had, their chemistry was enough. Enough to quell the doubts and the reality. But they were in the eye of a hurricane, and it was only a matter of time before they had to go their separate ways. Words and promises, whispers of forever, lost to the howling winds and the driving rain. Leaving their fire smoldered and the smoke lost to the haze of dawn. Keith Coggany. He lifts a hand, spreading his fingers wide. Long, crooked fingers. Wide palms. Small wrists. He twists his hand slowly, watching the neon lights play off of bronze skin. Gold. Blue. Pink. Green. Flickering. Ghostly. Caught between looking beautiful and sickly. Beneath the colors, he can see the scars. Small, but he knows they're there. A white blemish on his knuckle. A pale line across his palm. A few nicks on the back of his hand. He remembers each of them. Remembers how each and every one of them have their founding grounded in the name Keith Coggany. Scars that have healed and only show themselves as tricks of the light. It's the scars he can't see that still ache. The chill of the night seeps past the collar of his jacket, bringing a much-needed relief to heated flesh. He shivers with it, shoulders hunching as he shoves his hand back into his pocket, burying it deep. He feels the ember growing again. Feels it burning deep within his core, in a place where he hoped it would never see the light of day again. Feels it like an itch beneath his skin. A restlessness he can't ignore. An anxiousness that crawls just below the surface, threatening to chip away at his defenses and devour him whole. Gritting his teeth, feeling the tick in his jaw, he pushes off the brick wall, scuffing his boots on the worn concrete. Hey, you guys got this deal, right? He spins to face Hunk and Pidge, hands buried in his pockets, clenched into fists. Nails bite into his palms, and the pain is grounding, but it doesn't negate the itch. He forces his shoulders to relax and his posture to slouch. Lolls his head to the side as he looks between them. Pidge crouches on the ground, propped up on her toes, sitting on her heels, back to the wall. Her tablet is settled on her knees, holographic display projected in front of her. Her fingers still as she glances up at him, peering over the rim of her glasses. He can see text scrawled across the lenses. Hunk leans against the wall next to her, one foot lifted to press against the bricks. He's been fiddling with the device on his wrist, but Lance hasn't bothered to figure out what he's been doing. He's been too distracted. Too lost to shadows and ghosts that refuse to leave him be. Crawling back from the grave with the haunting fire of violet eyes and a desperate touch. Hunk and Pidge exchange looks, curious, dubious, and concerned. When they look back to him, Pidge is frowning and Hunk's brows are furrowed. I mean, we were all assigned to this deal, Pidge says slowly. We're set to meet up with them in 15. Lance shrugs with one shoulder, letting it rise and fall with practiced ease. His eyes wander away from them. To the neon signs that hang from the walls. To the main street and the bodies that hurry past the mouth of the alleyway. The rush of hover cars and speeders as they zip past. Yeah, but you don't need me, right? He waves a hand vaguely in the air, gesturing to them both. I mean, you're the brains. You usually do all the talking. Hunk is the muscle, because literally everyone is afraid of him. I'm just kinda here for numbers. You don't need me, right? There's a plea there. Silent and subtle. Just hovering beneath his words. Slinking in the pauses and contouring the undertones of his voice. He doubts anyone else would have picked up on it. But these are his friends, and he can tell from the way they exchange looks that they recognize it. You okay, buddy? And crap, there's Hunk's soft voice. That's the last thing he needs. That's the voice that barrels right through his defenses, and those walls are the only things keeping him standing. Fine. Even he can tell his voice is tight. He purses his lips, lifting his chin just a fraction. I'm gonna go for a ride. Hunk's brows go up at that, and he blinks. The motorway. Lance gives him a sharp nod, tight lips, and hardened eyes. In his peripheral vision, he can see Pidge looking between them, but he holds Hunk's gaze. Hunk frowns. Lance. You know where to find me, he says, spinning on his heel. He walks toward the mouth of the alley. Not quickly, but certainly with purpose. Lifting a hand to wave, he calls out behind him. Call me if you need me. I need to get some air. They don't try to stop him, but he didn't think they would. They both know he has moments like this. When the anxiousness and restlessness make a home beneath his skin. When he has thoughts nipping at his heels and clawing at his back. Sometimes he needs a distraction. Sometimes he needs adrenaline. Sometimes he needs a fight. But with this. With Keith Cogney. He needs the motorway. His speeder is parked just around the corner. When she had been pristine, she had shined white and blue. Now she's dented, dirted, and dinged beyond true repair. He doesn't care. It adds to her character. A testament to his life. What he's survived. What he's capable of. And she still runs like a dream. Swinging his leg over, he settles into the soft leather of her seat. Body already alive at the familiar feel of her between his thighs. Beneath him. With his thumb, he spins the ring on his index finger. Twisting it around until the crystal blue gem faces down, the same direction as his palm. And then he slaps his hand down on the circular pad in front of him, between the handlebars. The pad flashes to life, reacting to the key housed in the gem of his ring. Flickering blue and white light flooding through the console, bringing his bike to life. The pad beneath his hand flashes, scanning his palm, before momentarily blinking green. Then his bike roars to life, a hum and vibration that rages through him, settling into something powerful and familiar beneath him. It lifts seamlessly from the ground, hover engines smooth and pristine and far more powerful than the commercial ones, thanks to Pigeon Hunk. He grins. Feels it wild and manic as it stretches his lips and aches in his cheeks. Heart beating wildly in his chest. The ember burns, but in this moment, it can't touch him.
The air is chill but thick with moisture. It whips past him, tugging at his clothes and biting at his skin. Hunk would kill him if he knew Lance was riding without a helmet, but it's worth it to feel the wind combing through his hair, cutting across his neck, stinging in his eyes, and bruising his cheeks. The thrill, the adrenaline, the wild beats of his heart lost to the whip of wind tearing past his ears. Violet eyes burning against skin, hands desperate and firm, holding him, pushing against him, grabbing him, blunt nails clawing against flesh and tearing uselessly against clothes, fingers bunching up in his air and tugging at the roots, desperate, clinging, needy. The motorway curved around the city, a large outer belt that circled it endlessly, offering different avenues into the city streets. or curving out into the wastelands between cities. Large concrete roads, wide and dominating, rising out of the earth like ancient monstrosities, chipped and cracked, blackened with soot and perpetually damp with fog, twisting and coiling above, under, and around one another, giant man-made snakes that writhed below, bloody lips and split knuckles, hands that wipe sweat from their faces only to trail streaks of red, eyes flaring, bright and alive, a fire burning in them, cheeks pink with exertion, a smirk that tugged at the corner of lips, leaving them powerless to fight it, back to back, pressed tight, safe as they faced each other, exchanging wild and manic grins, eyes blazing, bruises, cuts, pain to remind them that they're alive, pain that makes life thrilling, bleeding exhilaration into ecstasy as they came together after the fight, wounds stinging, but ignored as pleasure dulled their aches, overriding them until they were high, 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 on each other, on life, on adrenaline, and bad decisions leading to good rewards. Billboards lined the motorway, flashing, bright and hypnotic. Some were pads with holograms, dancing girls, seductive men, advertisements for bars, clubs, medications that were barely legal, surgeries, lawyers, companies that no one could live in the city without knowing about anyway. They flashed as he sped fast, colors and lights blurring together. Streaks of nothing, streaks of everything, splashes of colors in the darkness of the night, lights burning through the fog, streaks to his vision as he stared forward, lining the edges of the motorway, creating walls, walls that kept him safe, comforted him in their familiarity. Pale face, angel sharp in anger, soft in longing, lips quick to scowl and slow to laugh, a laugh that felt like its own reward, a laugh worth every ounce of effort used to pull it from him, a smile that felt like a star peeking through the smoke, rare and beautiful and blinding, butterflies in his chest, a pleasant crawling beneath his skin, electricity sizzling through his nerves as he reached out to touch, a violent thrill racing down his spine as he was allowed to touch and explore, as hands came to him in kind. But the motorway was crowded, the entire air of it, rising high above the concrete baseline. Hover cars, speeders, hover bikes, domestic ships, all with hover engines and anti-grav mods. Lanes were a thing of the past. If he looks closely, he can still see the faded paint on the construct below. Here, in the air, it's a free-for-all. The police have far more deal with than traffic laws. They weave around each other, speeding past, each and every one of them with their own agendas and places to be. They regard others on the motorway as obstacles, things in a way, ignore, avoid. Lance whips by close to the ground, where the crowd is thinner. He weaves through the people he does see, speeding far faster than any of their commercial and custom jobs are able to go. The Paladins have the best of the best mods to their speeders, courtesy of Pigeon Hunk. Not even the Galra can catch his ride, and it saved his ass a time or two. A challenge sparking in his eyes, a dare coiling around the edge of his words, a smirk lurking in the corners of his lips, a hair from mocking, an inch from hopeful, 100% goading, and positively knowing. He dangles bait, and Lance can't help but to snap, to rise to it, to rush on after him. He's addictive, transfixing, intoxicating. He can fight it all he wants. They both know he'll give in. He'll chase to the ends of the earth just for the possibility to prove himself better. Or for a smile. He'll take both. The challenge is a fire in his veins, a vibration in his core. It makes him feel alive. He makes Lance feel alive. And when Lance knows it's not just him, when he dangles the bait, Kate is right there to grab for it, right there to grab for him. When speed comes danger, and Lance lives in the thrill of it, feels it thrumming through his veins, feels the wind like sparks across his skin, feels the tug of it, the tug of gravity and momentum, and he resists it, leans to it, fights it, and comes out victorious. He speeds through it, cuts through it like a knife as he rips down the motorway, leaving others in the dust. As he leaves the shadows behind him, where his thoughts can't reach him, leaves his heart lodged in his throat and incapable of feeling much more than a rapid pulse of freedom as he outruns his ghost. Keith's ghost, however, has always been persistent. He comes to the motorway to escape it, but it's always right there with him, right behind him, sturdy and begging for his attention. Hands wrapped around his middle, himself plastered into a solid back, wind in their hair and stealing away their laughter. Bodies tight, warm, sweat soaking into their clothes beneath the summer sun, blazing and burning through the city haze. Words like forever slipping through his mind, settling and burrowing themselves into his heart, taking up roots and refusing to be shaken free. Because Keith, everything about him just slots together with Lance. He feels it the way they just are, that the way they work, all things they could be, all at once. He feels it, he knows it. And then when Keith left, Lance let him go. Shadows are easy to leave behind, but the ghosts that are a part of you are harder to run from. There will always come a day when you have to stop running, when you have to face your ghosts, face the truths that you've been too scared to see, accept the things you cannot challenge, accept the things that you want to do, need to do, but fear all the same. Even as the wind rips tears from his eyes and bruises his cheeks, even as it tears at his clothes and his knuckles go white from the chill, and his grip, even as he runs, he knows today will be the day he stops. But for now, he let himself revel in the escape.
Hunk finds him in his favorite spot. On the bridge crossing over the bay. The speeder is near silent as it pulls up behind him. They're specifically designed to keep the noise to a minimum. On a normal street, surrounded by the white noise of a city, or on the motorway with the roaring engines of the other vehicles, the gentle hum would be barely noticeable. But out here, on a bridge barely traversed, it's a gentle hum that cuts through the silence. He doesn't turn as the engine cuts, nor when he hears heavy footsteps on the crumbling concrete. He doesn't even turn when Hunk sits beside him, settling on the waist-high ledge of the bridge, feet dangling over the dark, choppy water below. And for a long moment, they simply sit like that. Content in their silence. Sitting close enough that their arms touch, and leaning into it for the warmth and comfort of it. To know they're not alone. Lance had grown up in the urban suburbs of the city. Crowded, overpopulated, and cramped. He grew up surrounded by people and surrounded by noise. Noise was his cocoon of comfort. A reminder that people were around. That he wasn't alone. There was comfort in numbers. Comfort in the sounds of civilization. Even now, living deep within the cesspit of the city, he was surrounded by noise. He lived by the rush of vehicles and the din of conversation. He lost himself to the beat of the night, music, and laughter and voices. He slept to the sound of shouting, crying, the screech of machinery and the monochromatic tones of advertisements. He had always thought silence was oppressive. Could feel it like a pressure against his skin. A thickness in his throat. A ringing in his ears. Then Keith Coggin wandered into his life, and made him appreciate the peace between moments. The gentle lap of waves. The quiet between words. The distant blink of stars. It was Keith who showed him this spot. He can see them now. The stars. He'd heard of them before. Everyone has. But living in the city, around the city, it's hard to see them. Between the haze, the clouds, the smoke, and the lights, the night sky is a dark void. Sometimes the veiled light of the moon can be seen, blurry but persistent through the fog, but the stars are always lost. Then Keith brought him out to the bridge, and Lance was struck and mesmerized by the cosmos. On a cloudless night, he can see them. Twinkling dots of light on a blanket of empty space. So many of them. Far more than he ever imagined. They spent hours finding shapes in the sky. Discussing the universe. Imagining the galaxies. He still comes out here to think, despite how heavily Keith's presence clings to this place. Some part of him, wrapped up and smothered in layers of self-preservation, hopes that he'll find Keith here one night. But he never has. And he hates how disappointment tastes on his tongue. The bridge is one of the offshoots from the motorway, stretching out across the bay to the darkness of the distant shore. The bridge itself has been left to rot, like most of the streets, but it's more weathered from the ocean and the wind. It crumbles in some places, but their hover engines allow passage easily. Not even the neon glow of billboards stretches this far outside the city limits. Few come out this way, and only when they're traveling to another city beyond the bay. It's strange. This depth of darkness. Much like noise, he's always been surrounded by light. He always thought shadows would be unnerving. Instead, he finds a peace in them. So, Hunk says, dipping gently into the silence between them. Lance feels the ripples like shivers across his skin. The deal went smoothly. Lance hums. He knew it would. It was small-time business. They wouldn't dare try to cheat the Paladins. Allura's reputation precedes them, and it's not one people take lightly. The princess is as ruthless as she is kind. Two sides of the same coin. Pidge is taking care of the logistics of it. Got their info and everything. Added it to the database. Got some test product. She's bringing it back to Allura and Corin. Lance hums again, head absently bobbing. His chin is tilted up slightly as he stares out beyond the bay. To the darkness of the ocean. Where the horizon meets water and the scars splatter the night sky. So, Hunk tries again, voice turning a hair more cautious, an inch more casual, a fraction more neutral. The motorway. Yup, Lance says, popping the last syllable. This about him again. He doesn't need to ask. Hunk knows. Hunk was there for the fallout. Lance tilts his head to the side, a wry smile on his lips. A bitterness in his voice. A mockery in his breathy chuckle. You'd think I'd be over him by now, huh? Pretty pathetic. I guess, but, Hunk hums, leaning back and placing his hands behind him on the ledge, idly kicking his feet and letting his heels bounce on the concrete. Why aren't you? Lance tilts his head then, just enough that his eyes catch Hunk's small, contemplative frown. He feels his own mirror it. What? I was just thinking like, you meet a lot of people. You go out with a lot of people. A lot of them only last the night, some of them last a couple months, but like, they all end, right? Lance feels the echo of something bitter on his tongue. It's true enough. There's no point in denying it. Right. And you don't really get hung up on them. You always move on. I pretty much never hear about them after they leave. Lance sighs. An exhale that lasts a moment too long. His shoulders slouch with it. Right. He barely remembers their names. Barely remembers their faces. People who have come and gone. People who had been momentary pleasures, the next hit, the next high, the next escape. Nothing more. Nothing less. He's never been one for attachments. Not like that. So I'm just wondering, why is Keith different? You're still this hung up on him after years, dude. Not that I'm judging, you know I'm not. He pauses, and when he continues, his voice is much softer. Gentler. Guiding with a subtle touch. What makes him different from all the others? Lance's gaze slides back out to sea. He can smell the salt in the air. Feel it in the breeze. Why is Keith Cogana different? He's been wondering the same thing for years. But he knows that he knows the answer. Knows it lies behind all those walls he keeps firmly in place. Knows it lays with that ember he feels living on inside him. He's known it all along, but it's a truth he's refused to face. A truth he's turned his back on. One that he knows will crumble the foundation that's made him strong. One that pushes him out into an unknown. A darkness he's afraid of. It's comfortable here. Where he is. where he can live without facing it. Doused in the neon lights of the city and the flashing strobes of the clubs. It's safe where he can lay beside a faceless, nameless person who has his body, but not his heart. His body can heal. His body can bruise and scab and scar. His heart though? He's not so sure. Still, as he stares out to the stars, he comes to a realization. It doesn't hit him hard. Nor does it knock the wind out of him. It doesn't come to him as a stranger. It doesn't come to him with fear or uncertainty. It settles around him like the presence of an old friend. It comes with familiarity and comfort. It settles around him, inside him, like a second skin. One that feels right. Warm. A realization that this spot, here, thick with memories he's shared with Keith. Here is where he learned the stars exist. That the universe exists. It's here that he learned that silence and darkness aren't something to be feared, but something he can find comfort in. It's here that he learned that being alone, taking a moment to breathe, taking a moment to himself, slowing down, can be peaceful. So it might as well be here that he faces another monster that he's always feared. His nails pick at the worn concrete beneath him, idly tapping on its surface. And when he speaks, it's not so much a whisper as a breath of air. An exhale drifting past his vocal cords, drawing the truth from his lips. He broke my heart, Hunk. There's a shifting next to him. An arm around his shoulders, pulling him into a firm body. He melts into the touch. Lets his head fall until it hits Hunk's. I know, buddy. He's the only one I actually cared about. I know. I thought we would, stick around. I know. He feels his body hunch, curling slightly into itself, as if he might protect that ember inside him. And he says what he's been afraid to acknowledge. I miss him, Hunk. Every stupid day. The squeeze of the arm around him. An understanding sigh. I know, buddy. I know he left, but I let him go. I know why he left, and I didn't bother trying to stop him. I could have gone with him, Hunk. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me, no offense. None taken. But I still let him. How could I have let him go? You were young, man. We all make mistakes. We all do things we regret. And this is just one of yours. Hunk wraps him up in both arms, pulling him into a tight embrace, and Lance turns to meet it. Wrapping his arms around him and burying his face in Hunk's shoulder. Breathing in the familiar scent of motor oil and manufactured coconut. Who knows? Maybe he'll come back. Maybe he's still down your road of life, you know? Just a little bit further ahead than you originally thought. Lance stiffens then. Just a fraction. But it's enough for Hunk to notice. He pulls back, hands still on Lance's shoulders as he holds him at arm's length. His eyes roam over Lance's expression, but he turns his head, gaze once again finding the stars. What aren't you telling me? He asks, because of course Hunk would notice. Hunk knows him. Hunk knows there's usually a trigger for Lance to escape to the motorway. Why'd you come out here tonight? Lance breathes in deep. Breathes in the thick, salt air. Chilled with the edge of night. And holds it in his lungs. Closes his eyes, and just focuses on the feeling of the breeze caressing his skin. I saw him tonight. You. What? He opens his eyes, gaze finding the stars. Fixating on Keith's favorite constellation. I saw him. Briefly. On our way to Voltron, before the deal. Saw him with a group of people getting off speeders outside the Renegade Club. They went inside before I could get a better look, but Hunk. I'd know that goddamn hair anywhere. I know it was him. He's back. Silence stretches between them. Flooding in to fill the void left by Lance's voice. Filling, overflowing, stretching, and choking, and thick. He can feel Hunk's eyes on him, but he keeps his turned carefully away. His insides are a mess, twisted and contorted, leaden and heavy. He doesn't know if he wants to dance or puke, if he wants to scream or laugh. Finally, Hunk cuts through the silence once more. This time with a long, low whistle. Dude. I know. Dude. I know. What are you going to do? I don't know. And that's the problem, isn't it? There's so much he could do. So much he wants to do. But he doesn't know what would best. To ignore him. To put himself out there. To open himself up to her again or lock that door forever. Hunk pauses for just a moment, then speaks in that guiding voice. The gentle one that leads Lance unwillingly but gently to conclusions he's afraid of facing. Are you going to let him go again without a fight? And then, Lance does laugh. It bubbles out of him. A hair too manic, an inch hysterical, and a fraction too dry. It rumbles out of his chest and spills past his lips, making him feel lighter and lightheaded. Making him feel a strange sort of adrenaline. No.
The Renegade is a club off 10th Street, just outside the Paladins' own territory. Former territory of the Altinian Empire before they fell. Mostly unclaimed, but word on the street is a new gang is coming into the light to set up roots. As long as they aren't Galra, they have little to worry about. He doesn't have a plan, doesn't know what he'll do. He doesn't even know if Keith is still there. Doesn't know what'll happen if or when he finds him. He doesn't know what he'll say or what he'll feel. As he and Hunk sped off the motorway, weaving through small, much more crowded street junctions, aiming towards 10th, all he can feel is his heartbeat against his ribs and the tightness of his lungs. A thrill in his veins, the knots in his stomach, the ember in his heart that burns. He doesn't know what will happen with Keith, and he doesn't care, as long as something does. The Renegade is easy to spot. Their sign is faulty and flickering, but tall and large, casting and surrounding buildings in red and blue, reflecting purple off the windows of the taller buildings that surround it. As they near it, he slows, and Hunk hovers just beside him. They lower to street level, weaving around and through people, slowing to a drive-by speed. Turns out, finding Keith isn't nearly as hard as he feared it might be. He's outside the club, standing on the sidewalk, wearing tight black pants, tall boots that reflect the red and blue lights, a dark shirt covered by a cropped purple-gray and black jacket, hair dark, windswept, longer than Lance remembers, shoulders broad and strong. Stands speaking of confidence and certainty. Lance can see just a hint of his profile, his sharp jaw, his delicate nose, high cheekbones. He's speaking to two others dressed in the same jacket, back to a lineup of nondescript black speeders, standing close enough to assume they're theirs. As soon as he sees him, Lance's breath catches in his throat, stopped by his heart firmly lodging itself there. The ember in his chest burns, throbs, pulses. His lungs feel tight, and the knots in his gut is lead, but his skin buzzes with a familiar feeling, a spark of something he hasn't felt in a long, long time. Restless but not anxious, restless and eager, a thrill of joy, not fear, a sense of danger, but one that feels dangerous for whole new reasons, reasons that make his blood run hot and his skin feel cold. He feels alive in a way he hasn't felt in a long, long time. He knows the smile is on his lips, just as he knows he can't control it. He feels wild, restless, energy buzzing beneath his skin, crawling and growling, searching for an outlet, desire bubbling in him, for something, anything. This is a familiar heat, a familiar sensation, one of reckless abandon, one of freedom, one that he's gotten a taste of before as he found himself craving, needing, ever since. So it's with a juxtaposed sense of familiarity and unknown that he slows to a stop outside the Renegade, speeder hovering just above the street, with a wild sense of reverie as he shouts, "Hey, Kogani!" He freezes, shoulders tensing for just a moment before he turns, and Lance is once again caught up in the violet eyes, reflecting lights around them, absorbing them into voids of the midnight sky. The air rushes from his lungs as he is caught in that gaze, as he watches emotions pass over those features, familiar but sharper and broader with the test of time. Surprise, confusion, recognition, shock, awe. Lance grins, wide and toothy, feeling the sweeping breeze through his hair, feels manic and wild and young and free, feels the funk of his heart like a bass line to drive him forward, feels the air between them sizzle and crack with a tension that has yet to be determined if it's good or bad. Wanna race? He sees the spark in Keith's eyes, sees them narrow and flare with determination, sees the edges of his lips coil with the challenge, feels his gaze like a dare, and the ember in Lance's chest ignites, running in white-hot heat through his veins as his grip tightens on his handlebars. He takes off into the night, laugh lost to the wind as he hears Keith's speeder behind him. For the first time in a long time, he hopes his ghost will catch him.